She's not the right fit for the life I'm building." The sentence didn't shout. It didn't need to. Nate Holden delivered it with the same measured confidence he used in courtrooms. Clear, conclusive, designed to leave no room for appeal. And like every verdict he had ever handed down, it landed with the weight of something that had already been decided long before anyone said a word. Clara Hensley stood perfectly still in the center of the Aldrich Room at Donatello's, one of Chicago's most expensive private dining venues, and the very restaurant where she had worked as a senior payroll accountant for the past 3 years. She knew every inch of this room. She had processed invoices for the crystal chandeliers overhead, approved the labor hours for the servers, moving silently around the perimeter, and personally ensured that the kitchen staff received holiday bonuses the ownership had originally tried to cut. She had never imagined she would one day be standing in this room, in the dress Nate had told her was a bit much, hearing him explain to 40 guests why she was not the woman he intended to keep. "I care about Clara," Nate continued, addressing the table rather than her. His partners, senior attorneys, clients, their spouses, watched with the careful expressions of people deciding whether to intervene or simply wait it out. "But I have to be honest with myself about what this firm represents, the image we project, the partnerships we're building." He finally looked at her, not with cruelty, with something almost worse, pity. "I think we both know this isn't working." Clara's mouth opened. Nothing came out. 40 people in the room. A dozen of them were her co-workers, people who knew her name, who had thanked her for fixing their miscounted overtime, who had eaten the birthday cake she had quietly organized for the line cook who never got acknowledged. They watched her from the corners of their eyes now, frozen between professional obligation and basic human discomfort. The woman seated to Nate's left, polished, the kind of composed that only came from never having been ambushed in public, rested one hand carefully on the edge of the table. She didn't reach for Nate. She didn't have to. Her presence alone explained everything about the life he was building. Clara looked at Nate's hand, then at the breadbasket sitting between them that she had organized catering approval for 2 weeks ago. She had been in this room before the guests arrived. She had confirmed the floral arrangements and verified the wine allocation. She had done all of that quietly, efficiently, the way she did everything, without expecting anyone to notice. She waited for the familiar shame to rise now, the old reflex that told her to apologize, to make this easier for everyone, to slip out as quietly as she had always slipped in. It didn't come because the room shifted. A chair pushed back from the bar at the far end of the Aldrich Room. The sound was soft, almost imperceptible, but every person present heard it. The uncomfortable whispers that had resumed between guests stopped entirely. Rhys Delvano crossed the room slowly. He was not a man people described in neutral terms. In certain boardrooms, his name ended meetings. In certain neighborhoods, it started them. He was 42 years old, dark-haired, with the kind of stillness that most powerful men spent entire careers pretending to have. He wore charcoal tonight. No tie, a watch that cost more than the annual budget for this event, which he had never once used to check the time during any meeting, Clara had observed. She had observed quite a few. He had been coming to Donatello's for private dinners and closed-room negotiations for at least 2 years. In that time, he had never been difficult with the staff. He had never snapped at a server or complained to management. Once, nearly 8 months ago, she had watched him tip the busboy $300 in cash without any fanfare at all. The busboy's name was Diego. He had been working double shifts to cover his sister's emergency surgery. Clara had known that because she processed the staffing hours. She had wondered, quietly and privately, how Rhys Delvano had known it too. He stopped beside her now, not touching her, not inserting himself between her and Nate in a way that blocked her from sight. He stood close enough that she was not alone, and left every other choice to her. He looked at Nate. My apologies for the interruption. His voice was quiet, conversational. You were in the middle of publicly ending a 4-year relationship. Nate stiffened. Excuse me. I don't believe we've met. Reese offered nothing further. No name, no explanation. Several guests shifted in their seats because they already knew exactly who he was and what it meant that he had stood up. Nate straightened. This is a private event. It was. Reese glanced briefly around the table. You made it less private approximately 90 seconds ago. One of the senior partners, a grey-haired man near the head of the table, had gone completely still. The way men go still when they realize they are in the presence of someone whose name appears in conversations they are not allowed to document. Nate forced a short laugh. I don't know who you think you are, but... I think, Reese said mildly, that you've said enough. The silence that followed had weight to it. It pressed down on every person in the room until nobody could remember what they had been pretending not to see. Clara found her voice somewhere in that silence, small but hers. I need some air. Rice simply turned toward the exit. I'll walk with you. She almost said she was fine. That word had been living in her throat for 4 years, always ready. Instead, she followed him. The private terrace off the Aldrich room was empty. October air moved quietly through the potted laurels lining the low stone wall. The city glittered below, 40 stories of it, indifferent and alive. Clara leaned against the railing and looked at nothing in particular. You don't have to stay, she said. I appreciate what you did in there. But you don't have to. I know. Reese stood a comfortable distance away, close enough to be present, far enough to let her breathe. I wanted to. She looked at him. In 3 years of parallel occupancy, her in the back offices, him in the private dining rooms, they had exchanged fewer than 20 words total. Professional acknowledgements. Brief thanks. The kind of interactions that passed between people who moved through the same space without ever being in the same world. You're Reese Delvano, she said. Yes. You come to the Tuesday private room about twice a month. Usually. You always request the same server, Paulette. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. She's the only one who doesn't pretend she can't hear what's being discussed. Clara almost smiled. She's also the only one who reminds people to lower their voices near the kitchen pass-through. I'm aware. A pause. I asked Donatello's to give her a raise 6 months ago. Clara blinked. She got a raise 6 months ago. We all assumed it was the contract renewal. It was both. She looked at him for a long moment, unsure what to do with that information, or with the quiet certainty in which he delivered it. She turned back to the city. 4 years, she said. I was with Nate for 4 years. Reese didn't fill the silence with reassurance. He listened. The first year was good. I think it was good. I can't fully remember now, which probably says something. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. The second year, the comments started. He remained still. Nothing obvious. Nothing you could hold up and say, look, this is what he did. It was always, maybe this style would be more flattering on you, or you'd photograph so well if... She stopped. If. That word did a lot of heavy lifting. What did the ifs cost you? The directness of the question caught her off guard. She answered it, honestly. I stopped wearing color. I stopped eating in front of his clients. I started scheduling my lunch for 2:30 so I'd be alone in the break room. She exhaled. I apologized for ordering appetizers, twice, at separate restaurants, to the server. The city hummed below them. He said I was an acquired taste, she continued. Like that was a compliment, like I should feel grateful he'd done the acquiring. Her voice stayed even. She was surprised by that. The worst part is, I worked harder every time. I convinced myself that love was something you earned through continual improvement, that if I just optimized myself enough, I'd finally stop being the version of me that needed excusing. Reese turned to look at her. I planned this dinner, she said. I approved the invoice for the centerpieces. I confirmed the wine selection. I did all of it and had no idea he'd already decided. She shook her head slowly. He must have been planning this for weeks, and he chose my workplace to do it. I still don't know whether that was careless or deliberate. It was deliberate. Reese's voice was quiet and absolutely certain. He chose somewhere you'd be known, somewhere people would see. He wanted witnesses for himself, not for you. The observation was so precise it stole her breath. You've been watching him, she said slowly. I've been watching you, he said it without flinching, for about 8 months. She turned. I don't. The vendor dispute in February. He said it the way someone cites a fact they've reviewed more than once. The produce supplier was overbilling by 11% across 3 accounts. You caught it. Presented the correction to ownership on a Tuesday morning. When the owner tried to redirect the recovered funds toward management, you quietly filed the corrected figures with payroll so the kitchen line staff received their portion. Clara stared. Nobody mentioned it afterward, Reese continued. The owner considered it resolved. Your co-workers never knew it happened. You didn't tell anyone. It was the right thing to do, she said carefully. I know, that's why I noticed. The silence between them was different now, warmer, somehow, despite the October air. You were in the room that day, she realized, the Tuesday lunch. I've been in the room most days something worth noticing happened. The faintest trace of something almost gentle entered his voice. You thank the cleaning crew when you leave late. You learned the name of the new dishwasher within his first week. You once stayed 2 hours past your shift to process payroll because the junior accountant was sick, and you didn't want anyone to miss a check. He needed the money. I know. His name is Carlos. He's been here 11 months. His daughter started kindergarten in September. Reese paused. You sent the whole team a card when she started school, with a gift card for supplies, unsigned. Clara covered her face with one hand. How do you know about the card? Carlos mentioned it to Diego. Diego mentioned it when I asked why your department had the highest staff retention in the building. She lowered her hand. You asked about my department. I asked about you. He said it simply, as though admitting to watching someone for 8 months was a perfectly ordinary thing. I do that with people I'm trying to understand. And what have you decided? Her voice carried the weight of someone who had been decided about too many times. About understanding me. He looked at her with the same unreadable calm that had apparently been directed at her, without her knowledge, for the better part of a year. That you've spent a long time making everyone around you feel valued, he said, while being with someone who made you feel like a liability. The sentence landed without ceremony, just truth, delivered cleanly. Clara looked away. Her eyes stung. She refused to cry in front of him twice in one night. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with any of this, she admitted. You don't have to do anything with it tonight. He straightened slightly, glancing toward the door. There's a car downstairs. I'll have someone collect your things from inside, unless you'd prefer to go back in. I would rather be anywhere else on Earth. Then we'll go. 3 weeks passed the way time passes after a public humiliation, too quickly in moments and too slowly in hours. Chicago didn't stop for Clara's disrupted equilibrium. Her inbox kept filling. The quarter-end reports needed filing. She answered emails and processed invoices and scheduled vendor review meetings, because work had always been the one place where her value was legible to her. Reese didn't flood her with attention. He didn't orchestrate anything. He appeared in the ways their lives already intersected. A brief exchange when he passed through the building on a Tuesday, a message asking whether she'd managed to sort the billing issue with the new linen supplier. Small things, unhurried things. The absence of pressure was, she discovered, its own form of care. She started to look for him. She didn't tell anyone that. His mother found her first. Sylvia Delvano was 71 years old and wore her age like a decision she'd made on purpose. She had been attending the Harvest Foundation's annual benefit for 15 years and had personally known 3 of the catering managers by name before Clara started working events. She stopped Clara near the beverage station during setup and said, with the directness of someone who had never needed small talk, "You're the one who fixed the payroll problem in April." Clara blinked. Yes. My son mentioned it." Sylvia accepted a glass of water from a passing server and thanked him by name, which Clara registered immediately. He mentioned it more than once. It wasn't a complicated fix. The complicated ones are never the test. Sylvia looked at her steadily. The test is what you do with the simple ones when no one's watching. Clara didn't have an answer for that. "He's careful," Sylvia said, softening almost imperceptibly. He's been careful for a very long time. The world he operates in doesn't give much grace to carelessness." A pause. "He's also been very attentive to his Tuesday schedule for the past 8 months." Clara's cheeks warmed. "I wasn't aware." "He is." Sylvia smiled briefly, then became brisk. "Now, the seating arrangement for the main room has a serious problem. Do you want to hear my opinions or not?" The Harvest Foundation benefit was the largest charitable event Donatello's hosted each year. 300 guests, a live auction, enough political and financial weight in one ballroom to reshape 3 city block projects. Clara had coordinated the back-end operations for 2 consecutive years. She knew every vendor, every service route, every emergency contact. She knew by the time the event was half over that Nate Holden was seated at table 9. She didn't know who had put him on the guest list. She suspected he had arranged it himself because Nate had always been strategic about rooms. He found her during the pre-auction cocktail hour, near the corridor by the kitchen, where she had slipped away to confirm a revised appetizer count with the catering manager. She heard him say her name and turned. He looked exactly like someone who had prepared for this moment. Pressed suit, earnest expression, the particular quality of humility that exists only in performance. "I've been hoping to catch you," he said. Clara looked at him. She didn't tell him to leave. She didn't ask what he wanted. She simply waited. And she noticed, without particular emotion, that she was not afraid of him. "I owe you an apology," he said it carefully, testing each word for tone. "What happened at the partner dinner, how I handled it. I was wrong. I know that." "Do you?" "I was under enormous pressure with the partnership decision. I made a terrible choice about the timing and the..." He paused. "I made it in your workplace, which was inexcusable." "The timing," Clara repeated. "That's what was inexcusable, the timing." "Clara, you told 40 people that I wasn't the right fit for your life." Her voice was even. She had rehearsed nothing. The steadiness came from somewhere she hadn't known existed 3 weeks ago, in a room where I have worked for 3 years, in front of people who know me. "You chose that room and that audience because you wanted to feel certain. You wanted witnesses to make it feel definitive." She held his gaze. "And then you went back to the table and had dinner." Nate opened his mouth. "I spent 4 years apologizing for my presence," she continued. "I stopped ordering things I wanted. I restructured my own schedule around yours. I resized myself in every possible direction to fit the shape of what you said you needed." She exhaled. "And you were not worth a single one of those changes. Not one." The kitchen corridor was very quiet. "So no," she said, "an apology is not something I want from you." Nate stared. Whatever he had come prepared for, it wasn't this. He had expected tears or anger or the wounded silence he had grown used to navigating. He had not expected her to be finished. He tried one more angle. "I heard you've been spending time with Delvano." He let the name land carefully, pointed. "You should be careful with someone like that, Clara. That world is none of your concern." She turned back toward the kitchen. "Enjoy the benefit, Nate." She walked away. She did not run. She did not shake. She pushed through the kitchen door, leaned against the wall on the other side, and breathed. Behind her, through the door, she could hear the muted sounds of the ballroom. She stayed still for exactly 40 seconds. Then Carlos walked past with a stack of plates, saw her face, and stopped. "You good, Miss Hensley?" "Yeah," she said, and meant it. "I'm good." She pushed off the wall and went back to work. She found Rice after the auction near the terrace doors, speaking quietly with a man she recognized as a city official who occasionally used the Tuesday room. The official excused himself when she approached. Rice watched her cross the ballroom with the same patient attention he had apparently always given her. "He came," Reese said. "Not a question." "Yes. And?" "I told him no." She paused. "I told him some other things first." Reese's expression shifted, barely, but she could read it now. Something between relief and quiet pride. "You didn't need me." "I know." She stood beside him, looking out over the ballroom where 300 people talked and raised paddles and laughed at things that had nothing to do with her. "But knowing you were here made it easier to know that I didn't." He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, deliberately, the way someone retrieves something they've been carrying with intention. He held out a folded piece of paper. She opened it. A staff memo in her own handwriting, dated nearly 10 months ago. She had sent it to the catering coordinator at the end of a long Friday. "Please make sure the prep team takes their break before the guests arrive. They've been here since 5 a.m. People eat better when the people who feed them have eaten first." She stared at it. "You kept this." "The coordinator had pinned it to the kitchen corkboard," he said. "She told me the woman who wrote it had stayed 4 hours past her shift that day, unpaid, because the vendor delivery was late and she didn't want the kitchen team to absorb the blame." A pause. "I asked to keep it. In exchange, I arranged the donation that covered the new refrigeration unit in the prep kitchen." Clara pressed her lips together, hard. "Why?" The word came out smaller than she intended. "Because it reminded me that some people do the quiet things simply because they believe others deserve them." He folded the note with care. "Not because anyone is watching." She stopped trying to hold back the tears. These were different from the ones she'd cried in the Aldrich room 3 weeks ago. Different in the way that rain is different from a flood. Those tears had come from the collapse of something she had exhausted herself trying to maintain. These came from somewhere she hadn't known she'd been protecting, the part of her that had continued, despite 4 years of being edited and adjusted and apologized around, to believe that how she treated people actually meant something. "I thought I was invisible," she said. "I know." Reese looked at her directly. "That's why I paid attention." He offered his hand then, not urgently, not with expectation, simply open. She looked at it for a moment. She thought about every meal she had rearranged, every dress she had returned, every compliment she had deflected because she had been taught, slowly and thoroughly, that accepting them was presumptuous. She thought about the memo on the corkboard, about Carlos and his daughter's first week of kindergarten, about Paulette, who had gotten a raise that no one could explain. She thought about the person she had kept being, quietly, stubbornly, in spite of everything, and the man who had noticed that person when she couldn't see herself. She placed her hand in his. 7 months later, on a Saturday evening in late April, Clara Hensley arrived at a private dinner at Donatello's as a guest for the first time in 3 years. She wore a deep green dress she had chosen because she loved the color, her hair exactly the way she preferred it. She passed through the kitchen corridor on the way in, because she always did. She stopped to ask Carlos about his daughter's spring recital. She learned that Diego had passed his food handler certification on the first attempt and had been promoted to lead prep cook. She found out the new pastry chef's name was Annika, and that Annika had moved to Chicago from Portland 3 months ago and didn't know anyone yet. So Clara wrote down the name of a good bookstore and a decent farmer's market and handed her the slip of paper before moving on. The hostess, newer staff, someone Clara hadn't met yet, was visibly overwhelmed by the Saturday crowd. Clara stopped. "Have you had your break yet?" "Not yet, ma'am." "Take it now. I'll let them know you stepped away." The hostess looked at her with brief, genuine surprise. "Thank you." Of course. Rhys was already inside, at the corner table with the good sight lines. He had been there for 10 minutes. He had not checked his phone once. He watched her come through the dining room, unhurried, pausing at the right moments. The same as she had always been and would always be, and the expression on his face was not guarded, not calculating, not the careful neutrality she had encountered on a terrace in October. It was simpler than any of that. It was certainty. By the time she reached the table, she was smiling. He stood. He pulled out her chair. She sat down across from him. This patient, watchful, quietly devoted man who had stood up in a room full of important people to stand beside her, who had carried a handwritten memo in his jacket pocket for 10 months, who had never once, in all that time, asked her to be less, and she felt something settle in her chest that had not been settled in a very long time. Outside, Chicago moved through its spring with the indifferent energy of a city that never paused for any one story. Inside Donatello's at the corner table with the good view, Clara Hensley picked up her menu. She did not consult anyone. She did not calculate. She ordered exactly what she wanted, including dessert, and did not apologize for a single word of it.